Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Donovan Carter. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Today is August 26th. It is just about, I cannot read an analog watch very well, just about 4:40 in the afternoon. So we're in the home of Scott Camille, and I'm here with...
Carol Gordon.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gordon, for joining us today. Can you tell us can you actually spell your name for the record?
Carolgordon.
Okay. Ms. Carol Gordon. Thanks so much again, Ms. Gordon, for joining us. Can you tell us when and where you were born?
Miami Beach. What year?
What? You have to. Miami Beach.
1951.
Wow. So, what was Miami Beach like at that time? What was it like to grow up in Miami Beach?
It was really pretty pleasant. It of course the development hadn't exploded the way it did in some later years. What's been South Beach for quite some years now used to be really quiet, a lot of older apartment buildings, mostly senior citizens living down there. It was okay. A lot of Cubans, that was a time, not 51, but later. Late 50s, I guess, early to mid 60s, quite an influx. So we had Cuban neighbors. I learned Spanish. Also in school, it was just sort of understood, so I had 4 years of Spanish in school and forgot most of it.
Most people do. What about your parents? Did you have siblings or?
I have a twin brother.
What? No way. I'm also a twin. That's really cool.
Isn't that great?
That's the best.
And I had a younger brother who passed away about 10 years ago.
And your parents?
They are long gone.
So we're gonna fast forward a bit to, I guess, your involvement with the Gainesville Eight. How did you end up here today? What brings us here today?
I was riding my bike home from school one afternoon. I lived in a 3-story house, which is still there, on the corner of Northeast 9th Street and 5th Avenue. It was about a dozen kind of dirty hippies living there, including me. And anyway, so I rode my bike home, and I was passing Northeast 8th Street, the corner of Northeast 8th Street and University, and there's this big old 3-story White House, and these hairy guys they're outside on the roof of the first floor, and they're hanging a banner, and it said Vietnam Veterans Against the War. So I stopped and I watched them, and I said, "What's that?" So one of them, explained it to me, who they were, and I said, "Well, let me know if I can ever do anything to help." So I think it was within the next couple of days, I went inside and Scott was there, and he said, we could use some help with organizing some papers and filing, and so I said, okay, I could do that. And so that's how I met Scott. This was in 1971. And then when I don't remember how the rest of 1971 went, but when the indictments came down, I know, I had, somehow I had met Larry Turner, and I ended up when his secretary went on vacation for 2 weeks, he asked me if I would sit in, and said yes, because I knew how to type. Learned that in high school. And so then that's how I met him. And then when the indictments came down, he asked if I would type pleadings. And I said, sure. So that's how that went.
Wow. And so what, okay, what brought you to Gainesville from Miami Beach? Were you in school or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had run into a friend from high school right after when I graduated high school. I couldn't wait to make my own money. So of course, I became a clerk typist at an insurance company. And I ran into a high school friend one day, and he said, what are you going to do about college? I said, I don't know. I guess I'll go here. And he said, you have to go to Gainesville. You would love it. So I told my mother I wanted to check out Gainesville, and we drove up here, and I fell in love with it because it was small and just tons of green space, tremendous tree canopy and hippies everywhere. There were no hippies in Miami Beach that I ever saw. So that's how I came to Gainesville.
Some long-haired hippies that brought you. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That kind of clears up the picture a bit.
Okay.
And what was it like? What was the attitude towards the war among students at that time?
Well, I went to Santa Fe. I honestly don't recall a lot of talk about it. Even though I was a good student, I was an AB student, I never really cared much for school. It's just something you had to do. And the good news is, right at the end of my sophomore year, well, that's not good news for them, but the indictments came down, and that's when Larry asked if I would type pleadings, and there was a lot to do, so I dropped out of school. I was kind of happy about that. And so I spent the next year, helping them with pretrial work.
Wow. And so this must have been exciting for you, I guess, like you were saying, you were kind of excited to...
It was exciting. It was way better than school. And I got to travel with Larry to Tallahassee for pretrial hearings. And went to, it was Jacksonville, I think, where the 4 unindicted co-conspirators were? Duval County? No. Was it Tallahassee? I don't remember now. I have to ask John. Have you interviewed John Chambers yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe you got him yesterday.
Okay. Well, he would know. So, yeah, I visited them in jail. That was an eye-opening experience.
What was that like, visiting them in jail?
Well, it was a small cell. I remember it seemed kind of warm in there. I could just look at them through a window. And I felt bad for them. I knew why they were in there. And I had tremendous respect for them for having the courage of their convictions. So I didn't get to, sit down and visit with them. I could just talk to them through a little window. It was the whole thing. The whole year was very interesting. I was excited. I was really into what I was doing. The defendants were pissed. So there was a real mix of emotions going on. And we all lived in this one house we called the defense house. It was on, did anyone tell you? It was on Old Archer, well, what used to be called Old Archer Road, which I think the road is still there, but I don't know what it's called. So it was a big old 3-story house. And It was all the out-of-town defendants and wives or girlfriends, and Nancy and me on the defense committee, and one of the defendants, John Niffen from Texas, his wife Kathy was with him, so she was on the defense committee, and this other guy named Frank Hall, and I think he was from Tallahassee. So the four of us were the defense committee, and it was interesting. There were guns in the house, you know, and the guys, for a while there, a lot of them were mad at Scott. They blamed him for everything, that for them having to be in Gainesville, and so there was some fights. There was some arguing. I mean, nothing that came to blows. No one pulled a weapon.
Well, that's good.
It was really good. So every night before the trial, we women would prepare lunch for the next day for them to bring to the courthouse, for us to bring to the courthouse. So we'd make like egg salad or tuna salad or, you know, chicken salad, big batch, because we're making for like 20 people, the defendants and the attorneys and us. So John Niffen taught us how to make Kahlua, which is basically coffee, grain alcohol, and dark corn syrup. So we'd make a batch of Kahlua every night and pour it in a dark corn syrup and put in the big box with the couple loaves of bread and whatever salad we made and anything else. And we just walk it through security, and they never looked twice at the corn syrup bottle. And then we go into the commissary and pour some in our coffee. And that's the way we started the day.
Wow.
Because courtrooms are really tense places.
Yeah. And long, and like you're in there for a long time. And
long time. And thank goodness for lunch breaks.
yeah. Really. Could you talk about what surprised you most at the trial, or what, like?
What surprised me the most was like the first day when we broke for lunch, and the Larry Turner and the prosecutor, who had, you know, been at loggerheads during the trial, when we broke for lunch, Larry gets up and walks over and slaps Jack Caruth on the back. How's it going? You know, where are you going to go eat? I'm like, they're buddies? But I found out, I mean, that's just the way Larry is. He's just a very warm, open, friendly person. And I also think that was probably just part of the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you go back into court and you sink your teeth into the opposition.
Yeah, that is definitely very surprising. Would you say you learned a lot? Well, okay, I imagine you learned a great deal, I guess, just from helping out with the trial and pre-trial stuff like that, and, you know.
I became a paralegal. I was a paralegal for 20 years.
Yes.
So it seemed like a logical thing to do. And the way that happened, that was Larry, once again. And after the Gainesville Eight trial, we had a mailing list, a ginormous mailing list, because people were very anxious to contribute to the cause, and the lawyers didn't get any fees at all. All we had to pay for is court costs, which could be considerable, you know, with all the paperwork that had to be copied for us and stuff. So after the trial was over, I took our mailing list. There was another anti-war situation in Madison, Wisconsin, with Carl Armstrong and his younger brother and two other guys who had blown up a building on the University of Wisconsin at Madison campus. Hi, honey.
Hi.
So they had asked for our mailing list, you know, so they could get in touch with our contributor. Now that situation, they were just having, Carl was having a mitigation hearing. He had to plead because I guess everyone in Madison knew that they had done this. So anyway, they just needed to raise money for a mitigation hearing and whatever else. So I took the list up there, and I think I also went over to Milwaukee for some reason, something to do with stuff. Anyway, I got back in the spring of '74, and Larry called me up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, nothing. I kind of just got back to town. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next." And he said, "You want to help start a legal aid clinic?" And I said, "Sure." So this was Storefront Legal Aid. Anyway, it was Larry and 3 other young lawyers. Stephen Mickle, you know who he is? Mm-hmm. And a little southern white lady named Clara Guillen. Mm-hmm. She's the sweetest little thing. And this guy named Jim Pierce from the law school. Mm-hmm. So they were the ones starting this clinic, and my job was to first write to all the private attorneys in town and see if they'd be willing to donate a couple hours of their time, maybe once every month or two, depending on how many lawyers agreed to help out. So we got a really good response. So we started this clinic and named it Storefront Legal Aid, and it was on Southwest 2nd Avenue and 9th Street. So I ran the clinic. It was 2 hours, like every Monday night, like 5 to 7, I think. And so I would do the intake and the screening, and then, you know, they'd talk to a lawyer. It was free. It was for any low-income residents. I'm talking about you.
Well, good. Should I stick around to defend myself?
Yeah.
Love you. I'm leaving.
I love you.
Okay.
Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, Storefront Legal Aid. And yeah, it's for all low-income residents of Alachua County. So that went on. And I was doing it for free. I don't know how I was living. Must have had some savings. So we got title. Oh, first they slid me through the CETA program, which was a local sort of grant. I don't remember what's CETA. I don't remember what that stands for. So I got paid a little bit through that, and then we got Title 20 funding, state funding, to pay me, and then we were also able to hire a staff attorney and a secretary. So then in 1978, we got federal funding through the Legal Services Corporation Act. So that's when it became, we spread out into 12 counties, and it became Three Rivers Legal Services. And the rivers were the Suwannee, the Ichetucknee, and the Santa Fe. So that was that. And so I stayed there until 74 through 1988. I was with Storefront / Three Rivers.
Wow. That's cool.
It was great.
Yeah. And what, yeah. It's definitely, like you said, much more exciting than being in school and getting that education.
So much more.
Hands-on like that. It's, wow, very valuable. Let's see. So from some of our other interviews we've had with, you know, some of the other gentlemen and some of the veterans, they've talked about how they kind of recall a change happening in their mind when they say, oh, you know, I learned kind of the other side of the war or something along those lines. Like, oh, I learned kind of what was really happening. And there was like, you know, for instance, Don Purdue talks about, oh, you know, he said, I came from rural Florida, you know, I kind of, you know, understood, just listening to Uncle Sam, right? And they mentioned kind of how their patriotism, you know, maybe blind initially, kind of changed, and they thought differently, you know, before and after the trial about, you know, their nation and the laws and things like that. With your experience, you actually kind of, you know, gained a different insight into kind of the legal realm through like paralegaling and things like that. Did you also kind of think differently kind of before and after the trial about law or about, you know, the system, if you will?
Well, I was always anti-war. I know, that was a sea change for Scott. And maybe some of the other veterans. Have you seen that Winter Soldier investigation film?
I don't think so.
Oh, you got to see
Winter
that.
Soldier.
I'm sure he's got a copy here.
Okay, nice.
That's the greatest little film because that was done in 71, I think. And that's where, and Scott, I don't know if he says it in the film, but that's where he went through his sea change about his level of patriotism. What was the question? Oh, me. What did any change about how I thought about the law or the system?
Or the system. Or...
I was so young. Let's see, the trial was 73. I'm not sure I had enough life experience to, I never thought about it. It was fascinating. I mean, I'd never been in a courtroom before. So, and I had another woman, I wish she have been able to come. This woman, Margie, helped with jury selection. She, based on her education at UF, she was able to help. She had some sort, I don't remember, sociology background, not anthropology, I don't think. So I got to watch the jury selection process, mostly from the defense side, and listen to how they strategized and how they chose the jurors. That was fascinating. And of course, going with Larry to Pensacola is where the pretrial hearings were. Learned a lot about intolerant judges. Yeah, it was very educational. And I hardly knew anything about the law before I got involved in any of this. So I can't say I experienced much of a change. I hadn't really encountered it.
Wow, yeah, it's such a, like you're saying, I can't imagine being, like you said, you mentioned you were so young at the time, and just like being, maybe not swept up into it, but engaged in something kind of that grew so quickly and became such a big deal. That's awesome.
It's quite an education, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Would you say that this is something that you had expected a young Carol Gordon to do? Like, would you ever say, oh, yeah, that checks out with,
I never thought of anything like this. I just, I mean, I'm from a family of Democrats, so I always lean that way. That was no issue. And no, and sometimes I think about, God, I wonder what my life would have been like if I had stayed in Miami Beach. And I can't imagine. But it sure wouldn't have been anything like Gainesville. I'm so happy I moved up here.
Wow. Yes, that's amazing. And what of these, I guess, what have you been up to for the last 50 years or so? What's that been like?
What have I been doing for 50 years? Mostly, well, I'm a political junkie, which I never intended either. But, with that kind of a start, I moved up here when I was 19. I was like 70, 71. So I met Scott when I was 20. And then the Gainesville Eight happened when I was 21. What was the question?
What's he been up to since?
Oh. Let's see. I met my husband in 77. He was a musician and an anti-nuke activist.
What's his name?
Gary Gordon.
Gary Gordon.
So he ran for city commission in '82, I think it was.
City of Gainesville?
Yeah, city of Gainesville. So, of course, we got married in 1980. So, running, his running for office, that was fun. He really, he's very smart, and he was right on all the issues, all the democratic issues, and he was able to pull together a coalition of organizations. That's how he won. The environmentalists and the labor people and the LGBT community and the women, and it was just great. But when he ran for re-election, his opponent, David Coffey, outslicked him. Gary's not slick. He's very smart, but he's not slick. David was very slick. And he outgreened Gary, sort of. He was touting himself as the real environmentalist, although he didn't have any background for it. Anyway, so David won. So anyway, just that political adventure with Gary really got me into enjoying working on local political campaigns. So that's what I've been doing.
Wow. Any, I guess, how do I ask this? I guess any standout campaigns that you've worked on? Some stand out to you the most?
Oh, God. There's been so many. I mean, just many campaigns stand out. I'm sure I could come up with something, but not right now. There's just been so many. I mean, every year there's 2 campaign seasons, spring and fall, except they just changed that. Now everything's in the fall, which I think is a big mistake. It sort of streamlines things a little bit. It saves the city some money, but you've got the city elections tossed in with every election in the world, the county, presidential. But we'll see. We'll see if it works.
Are there any, I guess, candidates that you're backing now or preparing to back now?
Well, there's no local elections coming up. Oh, I mean, there will be in the fall, I guess. I think the only race I've even heard much about is the sheriff's race. And I haven't decided on a candidate there. There's a lot to learn about the candidates.
Absolutely. How has your work in local politics influenced how you view national politics or politics as a whole?
Well, I used to always believe, I'm such a Pollyanna sometimes, that all the corruption, there was no corruption locally, but that's not necessarily true, I learned. I was very disappointed. I'm a little burnt out on working in local campaigns.
It's funny because sometimes people, they'll think about a show they watch where there's interviews like 60 Minutes, where there's a lot of questions.
So you were saying?
I'm disappointed in some things that I've learned about local politics, and that sort of takes the wind out of you a little bit. And I'm a little burnt out.
Yeah, I understand that. Let's see. Earlier, Scott was talking in his speech about how he feels the Gainesville Eight case kind of initiated the Watergate scandal, or played a role in it or influenced.
That's the first time I'd heard him say that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how has, or I guess, one, do you feel the same way? I guess is my first question. Do you feel like how do you feel the reach of the Gainesville Eight story? What do you think about how far it's gone? And
Well, I know it's certainly motivated thousands of people around the country. I mean, I think we raised over $100,000 in a year.
wow.
So people really wanted to support them. They believed in them. They believed the veterans and not the government.
And that's some pretty effective organizing. How do you think something like that could happen today as well? Some group or perhaps, I don't know, I guess a better question is, well, no, do you think something like that is possible today still? Like, I guess organizing on that scale, on something local or?
Local? I'm not sure it's possible because I've seen a couple of attempts, like this whole, I don't know if you've heard of this organization called Gainesville Residents United. It's around the whole GRU issue.
I have heard of it, but I haven't heard much about it.
Sorry?
I've heard of it, but I'm not very
It
well
hasn't
informed.
been made a big splash. Well, for a little while there, they had some articles going on. I'm not sure. Maybe the issue just doesn't generate the kind of excitement that the Gainesville Eight did, but it's been a challenge. I mean, the Gainesville Residents United is suing the Tallahassee government, you know, the governor and a few other significant people with the whole GRU takeover. And so I won't say we, because I'm really not active with Residents United, but they initially raised a bunch of money, but it's not enough. They initially appealed to people who they already knew were engaged in local politics. And so they got some good seed money, but they need a little more to keep the case going, to pay the lawyers, I guess, although I'm not sure they're charging fees. And it's been a challenge to raise funds from the general public. So, again, the issue, I mean, it's a major issue, having Tallahassee take over your local utility.
Yeah.
And yet, a lot of people are just hit the snooze button on it.
So what do you think, you kind of touched on it before, do you think it's just not as exciting of an issue, or maybe it's the messaging that's being missed, or in terms of the kind of the GRU thing going on?
Well, at the time of the Gainesville Eight, there was a lot of anti-war sentiment around the country. So that was really, not that hard to raise money. And we were pleasantly surprised. We had no idea so many people cared that strongly. So GRU, I'm trying to think of one or two other local issues that have been hot button recently. Of course, the whole, there's affordable housing, there's what was that other thing called? With the private neighborhoods and additional dwelling, ADUs, additional dwelling units, on private property. I just haven't seen people get excited about anything really recently. Any of the issues that really impact Gainesville a lot, every Gainesville resident.
Yeah.
And they're just, I guess someone else is taking care of it. I don't know.
Now, you talked a little bit as well as a strong anti-war sentiment already in the U.S. kind of during the Gainesville Eight trial. First, do you think, have you seen, I guess, since Vietnam, have you seen a resurgence in anti-war, maybe activity or ideas being spread a lot?
Activity, no. Personally, I haven't. The only time I hear anti-war chatter is when I'm around veterans. I mean, the Iraq veterans, especially. I mean, the U.S. always has a war going on somewhere. People talk a lot about, you know, Russia and Ukraine. That's not a situation we can do much about.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what else over there. So, no, I hear you. I think you're right. I also own pretty much almost exclusively anti-war kind of rhetoric and talk from veterans as well.
I've never met a veteran who would recommend it, you know,
Same.
after what they've experienced.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And how? So we've kind of talked about kind of the trial itself, you know, with some other folks, and we talked about what was it like kind of to be in the courtroom and to have the trial, but do you recall kind of what the city felt like during the time of the trial? To get a sense of maybe how regular Gainesville folks were responding to it or how they thought
You
about
know,
it?
I was living in the defense house and didn't get out much, really. Now that I think about it. And the only folks I was associating with were the folks in the defense house and the attorneys, really. So I don't know. I mean, of course, we had a lot of local supporters. There were a number of veterans, and actually a lot of people traveled here from out of town and out of state, veterans,
Wow.
to show their support.
Wow.
But Gainesville residents, I was just sort of cut off. I was living in that world, in the defense house. I was in the defense house or in the courtroom, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I understand. Have you talked about your experience with the Gainesville Eight and the whole trial and, you know, paralegaling since and after? Have you kind of explained your story to family or friends?
You mean way back then?
Yeah.
Well, my family thought it was cool.
Really?
Yeah. And I didn't really know that my twin brother, we're not a very close family, unfortunately. And I never really knew that he admired me for what I had done, because usually he's been generally not critical, but a little disapproving of my lifestyle, shall we say. About the time I moved to Gainesville, he moved to this tiny town in Iowa called Fairfield. And it was really where the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi set up shop. He built a university there. There's a whole transcendental meditation community there, which my brother's very involved in. He's a webmaster at the university, but he's also taught transcendental meditation, and he does it, and his wife does it, and the kids do it. Anyway, so he's got this, I love Fairfield. They have an organic vegetarian cafeteria,
Oh, wow.
which I think is great. anyway, so he's sort of lived this idyllic life in this population 9,000. And here's me in Gainesville. I used to, in the 70s, I was a real pothead and, you know, political stuff and just a whole different lifestyle. Anyway, I didn't find out until a few years ago that he thought it was really cool.
Wow.
What I'd been involved in. So anyway, let's see, you asked about family and friends, I think. Yeah, well, all my friends are left-leaning, so they thought it was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't get any disapproval from anybody.
I hear you. Do you know if some others have talked about having their picture in the newspaper? Do you know if you ever got your picture?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I wasn't a VIP.
Gotcha.
And really, I never like myself in photos, so it's fine by me.
Okay. I hear
And I'm really also, I'm a behind-the-scenes person. I'm not the big out front spokesperson for, I like working behind the scenes. I'm an introvert.
Get that. Let's see. I think that will be it for me in terms of my questions. Is there anything else you would like to say or to add?
No, only that it was the greatest experience of my life,
Wow.
and I'm pretty old. It was an exceptional experience.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're
Ms. Kim. I
welcome.
really appreciate it. Let's conclude our interview.